Hi, I'm Roxanne Richardson, and this is the Casual Friday podcast. In this week's podcast, I'll show you what I've been up to this summer. We've got a couple of finished projects, something in progress, and I have some spinning progress in Tour de Fleece and my breed study blanket. So let's get started. Between last spring and this spring, I knit 7 sweaters. When I finished the last sweater, it was my zip-up cardigan. It was so hot I didn't even want to try it on, so I haven't even been able to wear that sweater yet, and I was just in no mood to start a new sweater. I have a couple of sweaters in mind that I want to knit. Probably won't get started on those until this fall. So I've been wanting to knit smaller things. I'm going to show you a couple of sock projects that are similar to each other, but I've made some different choices in them. So let's go to the overhead and I can show you what I've been up to when it comes to socks. I think I finished these a few weeks ago. I don't think I ever showed them to you while they were in progress. There was my knitting group socks. So for me, what I would call a plain vanilla sock, just stockinette with whatever kind of heel and whatever kind of toe I wanted to use. I call those plain vanilla, and I like to use self-striping sock yarn because it entertains me. I like my socks to match. Never occurred to me not to make them match. Some people don't care about that, and it doesn't occur to them to try to make them match. So everybody gets to do what works for them. So I like them to try to make them match all the way down. These are slightly different. One of them has a little bit of pink right here. So let me put one of them on for you so you can see what it looks like. Okay, there we go. So it was knit cuff down. Started here, knit cuff down. I did a heel flap and gusset construction. My gussets tend to be very long because this part of my foot, this circumference around here, is pretty large, but my ankle is relatively small. So I have these two fit differences that are challenging. So like if I knit my socks according to the formula for a heel flap, which is to knit it for as many rows as you have stitches on the needle for the heel. This heel flap would be an inch shorter. I would be able to get this on my foot, but it would be tight and it would cause the sock leg to get pulled down into it in order to make up that extra room. So I knit my sock heels longer, which means that I end up picking up more stitches along here, and that makes the circumference around here larger. And because I want my sock to be the same size, sometimes a little bit smaller, but usually the same size as I want the ankle, I have to eliminate more stitches than I would if the heel flap was shorter and I had picked up fewer stitches. So this works for me to do that. I usually knit a heel that's 2 3/4 inches in length, which works well for my heel diagonal. I have a really high arch and that causes my instep to be high as well. So the kind of toe that I worked, let me zoom in. This is called a round toe. I do 8 decreases on a decrease round. When I start out, I might be doing something like knit 6, knit 2 together, knit 6, knit 2 together, knit 6, 2 together. And then I would knit 6 plain rows or rounds. And then I would do knit 5, knit 2 together, knit 5, knit 2 together, 5 plain rounds. Knit 4, knit 2 together, knit 4, no, 4 plain rounds, so that it gradually, the decreased rounds get closer and closer together. And this is a long round toe. So this is that way of distributing plain rounds creates a longer toe, and that works for me. It fits me really well. There is another way of doing a round toe, which is a short round toe. So every time you do a decrease round, you follow it with 2 plain rounds, regardless of how many decrease rounds. That's just another way, and it kind of just depends on how your foot is shaped. And like mine, you know, my big toe ends up here, and then I have this angle going down to my little toe is right here. And so I have this angle, but some people have feet that are, their toes are more even in length. I have a friend who has really long toes, like her little pinky toe is like the difference between where her pinky toe is and where her big toe is. It's just enormous. So I pick different toes for different types of people. I can really wear just about any kind of toe. I don't have any sort of foot irregularities in the toe area. It's all down here in the heel. Now, because of the way this striping sequence works, where you'll see colors repeated before the whole striping sequence is repeated, because of that, when I knit the heel flap, once I was finished with that, I just continued on in the yarn wherever it was in the colorway and continued on. So the pattern does get interrupted a little bit, but it's hard to see that. It's hard to really tell that there has been, an interruption right here, just because there's so much going on. The stripes are different lengths. There's some of this fake fair isle going on. And so there's that illusion. And so I never break the yarn. I just continue on with the strand that I started with all the way to the end. I just finished, and I just finished it this morning, this first sock for my brother. So my brother prefers a little bit thicker socks, which is nice because then I can use 6-ply sock yarn instead of the 4-ply fingering weight. This is a 6-ply kind of light DK, heavy sport, kind of on that edge there. And what it means is I can use essentially the same or very close to the same stitch count for his socks that I use for mine. So even though he's got this really huge foot, really long feet, big ankles, even bigger ball of foot, it doesn't really take me any longer to knit a sock for him than it would for me because the yarn starts out thicker, so I can use fewer stitches. Now this was a simpler stitch pattern. There's a dark blue stripe and then this kind of gray, light gray color, and then the blue, and then the gray, and dark blue, gray, so on. So one of the things I was thinking about as I was working the leg is what kind of heel was I going to work, and when was I going to start that heel? So I like to start a heel when a new stripe begins. That just always seems like a nice place to break. But I also want the leg to be as long as my brother wants. And this is where things get tricky. I want a bunch of things. I want the leg to be as long as he likes it. Some people would say, oh, just start toe up and then just knit until you run out of yarn. But that might leave a shorter leg. And so I would rather do things with the toe or the heel and allow me to maximize the yarn usage of the patterned yarn and give him the length that he wants. But I didn't know what kind of heel I wanted to work, and I had this simple repeating striping pattern. So I decided to start the heel with this dark blue. And I didn't really know, because you're using half the stitches that you are using in the round, and you're also slipping. So slipping a stitch doesn't use as much as knitting a stitch. So I didn't really know how the stripes would play out, other than I knew they would be thicker. Just know that from experience. But I didn't know how far, if I would get through a whole repeat of the striping sequence or what. What I did want to do was to maintain the striping sequence down the front of the leg. So wherever I ended up at the end of the heel, I would wind off yarn until I got to the beginning of the dark blue again, so I could continue the stripe sequence. So it turned out that when I finished the heel turn, I was in the middle of the dark blue, and I wanted to start this stripe with the dark blue, but I also didn't want it to be super skinny. It's skinnier already than the others because this is a larger circumference. So I wound off all of the rest of the blue and then all the way until I got back to the beginning of a dark blue, and I started again. Now I was weighing how much yarn I was using as I went, because I was thinking, am I going to have enough to knit 2 socks this size with this yarn, whether it all matches or not? And it's going to be very close, because you can see that the toe ends with the dark blue, which means I have to wind off again until I get to the dark blue in order to start the next one. So I think what I'm going to do, because again, it's going to be very close, is that when I knit this heel flap, when I get to the point where the dark blue begins, I will cut the yarn and I will join in this yarn. And I will just join it, I would just join it wherever the blue ends. And so I might have enough blue to give me to the end of the heel, but I might not. I might go a little bit into the gray, but that will be under the foot right here and you won't see it. And then I can just start right away with where I cut this will be dark blue and I can start it there. And then when I get to the toe, I can just use, if I run out, if I can't get all the way to the end with the dark blue at the very end of the toe, I'll just use what I have. And I know my brother won't mind because I've made him lots of socks over the years and he'll be okay with that. But I just, he because of the size of his feet and the length of a sock that he wants, it is close. Sometimes I do use a contrasting color for the heel, but I just didn't have any that was going to work with this particular sock. This is Regia sock yarn. It's called Cruise Color. It is hard, and it's getting harder, I think, to find Regia sock yarn. And it's especially hard to get solid colors in the 6-ply. If I wanted to get it, I'd probably have to order it overseas. I haven't found any US retailers who sell the solid yarns. And I know they come in both 50 gram and 100 gram, but I just can't find them. Or like I'd find somebody on Etsy and they would have a bunch that they were getting rid of, but they'd already gotten rid of all the colors. They'd already sold the colors that would be good for me and for socks that I would knit for my brother. I do a lot of experimentation. And sometimes it's a small swatch. I'm just trying to figure out how would you do this. Sometimes it's a bigger swatch. Sometimes it's an actual whole project. I've been known to knit entire projects in order to understand one particular thing. Sometimes those experiments are in hat form. And because most of the yarn that I just have on hand here is not superwash wool. I don't tend to use superwash wool unless it's for a specific reason. Like my sock yarn is all superwash. But for sweaters and hats and things like that, I tend to just use non-superwash wool. And if I'm doing an experiment, I'll just pull yarn from my stash and that's going to be non-superwash. So as a result, I have a bin that fits in like one of these kind of compartments. But it's in a unit that's over here outside of the camera. It is full of hats and none of them are machine washable, which means that I really can't donate them to for service projects. Like our guild always partners with different organizations, and hats is something in Minnesota are always going to be needed, but typically the service organizations request that they be machine washable, either superwash wool or a blend of wool and a synthetic, but again, machine washable, because you're giving this to someone who doesn't know what it's made of and doesn't have washing instructions. They're going to throw it in the wash and it'll get ruined if it's just 100% non-superwash wool. So I have a lot of hats that I can't donate. This summer, I've been thinking about some videos that I want to do. It could be potentially over the next year. It's probably not going to be just all in this fall. I think that was thinking I had these grand plans that, I can do this one and then this one and then this one. And I'm like, that is going to be too much. And I'm going to have another idea that's going to come to me that I'll want to do sooner. So it's more of a long range thing. One of the ideas for this fall is for top-down hats. So I've done a video on how to knit a hat without a pattern. I wrote an article for Interweave about that a number of years ago too. They printed multiple times in their Interweave's Winter Gifts issue. And it's basically how you can, if you want to do a quick gift, you want to make a hat, you can just pull yarn from your stash and you can knit it to the right size without having to use a written pattern where you're not matching that gauge. So it's just how to use your gauge with the yarn you have to make a hat that fits somebody. So I've written articles on that, and I've done videos, and then the past couple of years I did a bunch of videos on different ways of doing hat crowns. So a lot of people do knit hats on their own, but they might want a specific look in a hat crown, or maybe they're using a stitch pattern and they want to know how to transition, that kind of thing. And I decided I wanted to do something for top-down hats in a similar vein, but I needed to work out which increases to use and how to use them in order to get some of the similar effects that I have shown how to do with the bottom-up hat crowns. So I've been knitting little hats with yarn that I had on hand. One of them happened to be superwash, one was not. And so I came up with some ideas about samples I wanted to knit and what I wanted to do for this video. But I went out and bought yarn for this and made sure that it's machine washable. It's either a blend or it is 100% superwash wool, so that when all of this is done, I can donate these hats to the service organization and they won't just take up room senselessly in this bin of hats that I have. Now you pull these hats out sometimes and use as examples for different technique videos, which is, one reason I want to keep certain ones of them, but I don't need to keep adding to that. And I want to kind of go back to the overhead and show you kind of some of the things that I have been working on. Sometimes when I'm trying to figure something out, I will go and look and see, well, what have other people done already and how are they doing it? But this is a situation where I really wanted to experiment pretty broadly and see what I thought of results and try things in a variety of different ways. This is just an experiment that I'm doing in anticipation that I will be doing some videos and maybe a written tutorial this fall. I wanted to figure out a couple of different scenarios or a couple of different approaches or choices that people might have, and what kind of effect would you get with that? Because it isn't just a matter of, instead of doing a left decrease or a right decrease, you have increases that you have to do and they behave differently. I've done a few videos recently about how the behavior of different increases is different and they're used in different situations depending on what sort of result you want. So that was something I really wanted to experiment with hats. Here is the first hat I did, and it's got sort of that familiar spiral that you see in a basic hat pattern. I think I probably used make one increases for this. And then I decided to experiment with lifted increases, and I have a different type of spiral, but I actually like the result of this spiral better. I think it looks more like an upside down decrease. I mean, it actually looks like you've got a decrease here. It doesn't look like it was knit upside down. But I wanted to do something that also had a stitch pattern in it. And so I was experimenting with that. And so I've been tagging what I've been doing so I can remember, because let me tell you, I think I'm going to remember and then I end up not being able to. So this is one where I was experimenting with doing a top-down Knit One Purl One hat. And I think I started out using a left-leaning decrease, a left-leaning make one decrease. And then toward the end, I thought, well, what if I did it as a right-leaning one instead? Because I was doing them along this same edge every time so that the new stitches were coming out this way. And I looked at them like, oh, I actually like it better if it's a make one right. I don't always think it's going to make that much difference as long as you're consistent. But it turned out I much preferred that if the new column was going to come out in that direction, I wanted this pointing in that direction. So that's what I did with this hat. I wanted a whole hat. I wanted a rolled brim. This is essentially a reversible hat because it's just knit one, purl one. What I thought was interesting though was when you turn the crown inside out, I kind of like the way that looks. So that's the kind of thing where you could knit it one way, and then depending on where you decided you wanted to weave in your ends, you could decide what was the right side of the work and what was the wrong side. It's just a preference, you know, which appearance do you prefer over the other one. So this has just been some experimenting. I wanted to have some samples so that when I was doing videos that I wouldn't necessarily have to knit the hat the whole way through on video. I would have results already. But this little preview of some things that are going to come up this fall, maybe late fall, early winter. Now, if you have questions about like top-down hats that you have knit before, if you've tried to knit and you got frustrated with, let me know down in the comments what kinds of questions you have had about top-down hats. I did recently do a technique video on the easiest way to start a top-down hat. So you don't have to do a pinhole cast on or one of these disappearing cast on methods. It's the easiest way, and it looks exactly like all of the other methods in the end. It's just so much easier. So I will leave a link up here and down below to that particular video. But again, if you have any questions about top-down hats and how they work or best results, let me know so that I can address those in the future when I do these videos. Tour de Fleece started on July 5th. I always look forward to Tour de Fleece in the same way that I look forward to Finish It February, where it's like, oh, I haven't been doing this thing that I've been wanting to do, but this particular month is coming up where I'm going to devote that, you know, my time and energy to that. So in Finish It February, it's like fixing things or finishing a particular thing that I put to the side because I got fed up with it at some point. And Tour de Fleece is like that, where if I feel like I haven't really been spinning very regularly and I kind of have some projects like a sweater spin or something that I want to get done, then I can use Tour de Fleece to kind of get me motivated to do that. So I had a few things I wanted to do. I had already been working on spinning up some wool breeds that I had samples of that are unusual. They might be rare breeds or endangered breeds, part of the Save 'em to Shave or Shave 'em to Save 'em program. And I have a breed study blanket that's got 30 breeds in it. And so now I wanted to either add to that blanket or start a new textile of some sort where I have squares or strips of these other breeds, and I label them on the back. So that was something that I was doing leading up to Tour de Fleece. And then there was also a viewer a few months ago sent me some fiber, some roving that had been milled. A friend of hers in a mill here in the Midwest. They were from her sheep. She had dyed the wool and she carted it in a mill where she's working. And so this woman, Amber in Germany, wanted to send me a gift of wool from her friend who works in this mill. So she sent me, it's pretty close to a sweater's quantity, depending on how the spin works out. And so that was something that I wanted to get done during Tour de Fleece. And then also I volunteer at Gale Woods Farm, which is owned by our county park system, and they have a flock of Finn sheep. And so I volunteer there. I try to go once a week. You know, if I'm in town, I go there once a week. They have a fall shearing and a spring shearing. And so, you know, when those are done, then the scouring begins. And then lately we've been doing the dyeing. I was there yesterday and I dyed 5 different colors. I dyed hot fuchsia, sunrise yellow or sunset yellow, sunrise yellow, Amazon green, river blue, and the last one was amethyst. So it was fun. I got to do so many different colors in one day. But recently, the woman, Sherry, who kind of runs the whole fiber volunteer program, she's one of the farm educators, she mentioned that they were running low on hand spun yarn to sell in the farm store. And so she sent me home Let me go get this and so you can see what it is. Okay, so it's this bag, but it was full pretty much all the way. But it's this beautiful brown fleece with little white bits in it. Somebody went through and hand picked it, so there's really no VM vegetable matter in it. So I've been carding it on my carder here at home, like 1 ounce at a time, and then dizzing it off using a little tool. It's got a little hole in it, and then I can bring it off the drum carder as roving, and then I've been spinning it up. So I've been kind of alternating between spinning for my sweater spin and then spinning for the farm. And all I've got right now are singles. So this is the roving, those wine-colored roving. It's kind of showing up more brownish on my monitor, but it's a more purple toned wine colored. It was in 2 ounce balls, and it was a little bit sticky. There's still, you know, some lanolin in it, but it's just kind of a stickier wool. It's a Shetland Border Leicester Finn cross, the sheep. So I ran it through my carder again, just to kind of loosen everything up and making it easier to spin. So I've got 3 bobbins of this, something like that, 2 or 3 bobbins of this, of the wine color. And then I have, for the farm yarn, I have 4 bobbins that have I'm doing 1 ounce at a time so that I can do a 2-ply, and there would be a 2-ply hank that could be sold. I was spinning it pretty fine, and I'm like, this is taking forever. So I've been experimenting with seeing how much I can control the thickness that I spin, because I tend to just spin very fine, like I just naturally go finer, and that just takes longer to do. So, you know, I'm you know, playing around with that. There's plenty of wool for me to do. But most of what I've been spinning is just on bobbins. We're starting to run out of storage bobbins, but that's most of it. But what I want to show you is the results of the spinning that I have done with some of these unusual breeds, because these were new to me and they were so different from each other. So let's go to the overhead and you can see some of the breeds that I've been working on for my breed study. My friend Elizabeth, a couple of years ago, she went to Wisconsin Sheep and Wool, and she stopped by the Clemis and Clemis booth. They are selling, or were selling, I think these are 8 ounce bags of washed fleece for the Shave 'em to Save 'em program. And so she picked up 3 different breeds for me. I've had them for a year and a half, I guess. And I thought I should, you know, really do something with these and add them to my breed study. What's interesting to me about these wools is how different they are from each other. I mean, one of the reasons I decided I needed to learn to spin was when I saw wool in this sort of state for the first time, where it was clean, but I could see the original lock structure of the wool. So I could actually see what it looked like, and I realized how different different breeds of wool were from each other. Because when you see it all in roving or in combed top, it all looks the same. It doesn't really look any differently. It might be different as you're spinning, and it might create a different result in your knitting, but you don't have a sense of what was that like before it got turned into roving or combed top for spinning. And so that's really what pushed me to learn to spin, that and the fact that I couldn't find very many yarns that were commercially spun or spun by a mini mill that were in different breeds. It's easier now, but the simplest way to experiment or with different breeds is to get them in the fleece form. So this one is called Caracol. It seems a little like, if you just feel this, in a way it's almost like hair, and it feels a little both silky, but also, you know, not super soft, but you can see that it's got like wave to it. It doesn't have crimp to it. It's got different colors in it as well. So I don't have any of this carded up. What I do have is some finished yarn. And what I found was it spun up very nicely, very smooth. I'm trying to take better notes now. From what I remember, it was easy to spin. My notes are basically a gift tag where I'm trying to put a single, and then if I make a 2-ply, put that on the card and say how many wraps per inch it is, and then after I wash it, take another sample. I didn't say anything about how I spun it, how I prepped it. I'm just trying to do anything. I'm just trying to label, and you'll see why this is so much better than what I potentially could do. It's not as much as I could do, but it's more than nothing. So this will get knitted up into a swatch and then labeled as part of my breed study. So then you've got this Navajo churro, and it too is kind of just like wavy, and in some ways it's similar to the caracal in that, it's got this wave, and it's not super soft, but and it's got, kind of white and cream color to it, so it doesn't have as much variation in the color. But I didn't think it would be that different once it was spun up. I do have some of the carded wool here. And I know you can't feel this, but there's really no like bounce or stretch to it. The yarn that I made from it, it's like twine. It's like twine. You can use it to wrap up packages and ship them or something. Really not that nice, where the caracal actually has this smoothness to it it's just so different from this. But when you feel them in the fleece, it's like, well, that doesn't feel that different from each other, but it really does. It's a remarkable difference. And then the last one, this is one I want to experiment with more. I certainly have more. It's called Tunis, and it's American Tunis. I think Tunis is one of the oldest breeds, like domesticated breeds in the world. It's like the softest scouring pad you could imagine. Like, it's not coarse, and it's very like springy and spongy. And if you look at it, you can see how much crimp there is. This is not like long and wavy like those other ones were. I mean, it's just incredible. And now here's the roving that I made. I carded it up. It's just like, look at how boingy that is. It's just amazing. And so I decided to try a few different ways of spinning before I get, the quantity that I want to make a square. Although I might include all of these in my square because it's just so fascinating. And it's not rough. It's not like merino or anything, but it's just so interesting. I did a couple of things. So what I was doing is I was like finding the tips like this, and so I'd pull them out like this. Then I use this tool. It's called a lock pop. You can clamp it to your table. What you can do is you can take the washed locks and let me get this in here. You put it down on here until you can pull the tips through to open them up, and you do it at the butt end. This the end that was closest to the sheep. That was where they sheared it. So you do that. So I did that with a bunch of locks, and I kept them all lined up so that you could kind of tell because the yellow. I had them all lined up, and then I thought, well, are you supposed to spin them from the tip end? Or what are you supposed to do? I assumed from the tip end. And so the first article I got a hit on, written by a woman who said she always assumed that was what you were supposed to do until she took a class from someone who said no and explained the way the follicles worked, and you could spin them from the butt end instead, and then you run it on your finger and you can feel it just like you can feel in a hair shaft the scales. And I'm like, I cannot feel any of that. But I tried it from the butt end, and I got this yarn here, which is okay. It's, you know, not the most even, it's fine. But then I carded it, so I got, you know, this roving like this. And I tried a 2-ply and a 3-ply. And again, this is why I need to tag things, because I didn't tag these two, and I was like, what are these? I don't understand what I did. And I found this one had a tag on it, and I saw, oh, I spun it from the butt to tip. Oh, okay, that helps me. Because I was like, these all look kind of like they're the same. I couldn't figure it out. What this one is a 2-ply, and this one is a 3-ply. The 3-ply is a rounder yarn than the 2-ply. So, I've done a few different samples. I don't know that any of these are enough to knit up an entire 6 by 6 inch square. But again, I might just go from one to the other and keep a record of the fact that I had prepped them differently, but use them all in the same little square sample, or just knit them as far as I can. I don't know. I have this breed study blanket with 30 squares, and I designed it based on color and type of wool, whether it was a long wool or darkest cream to lightest cream going up to the top. And I kind of don't want to wreck that. And so I'm kind of thinking I might just do the additional breed study stuff based on what I spun and not worry so much about specific dimensions. So I was just complaining that I hadn't, you know, tagged these things, that I had all these good intentions of tagging this, and I wasn't sure what I was looking at. I had tagged this one, so then I could remember, oh, I used the pop lock and I spun from the butt to tip, but I wasn't sure what I was looking at here, and then I figured it out. Well, I just went to my desk, have some lunch, and I found this sitting on my desk, which I had created at the same time I created these, but apparently didn't bother to attach it. So I am well-intentioned. We'll see if I can get better at this. This is a sock ruler. This is one of those tools where I doubted that it would be any better than just using a regular ruler or measuring tape when I was knitting socks. I got it and tried it out, and I ended up really loving it. So this works really well if I'm knitting like socks for myself. I use it when I'm knitting the foot, whether I'm going toe up or cuff down, because with the foot, it's closed at both ends, and you want to make sure you've got the right length, you know, before you start the toe or before you start the heel, that you're doing things correctly. And so this rounded part fits right into the heel, you know, when this part's open before you've got, and so then you can easily measure whether it's the right length before you're starting the toe. Or if you started with the toe, you can measure, make sure that you're at the starting point you want in order to start the heel. And like I said, this works great for me because this fills up the whole sock. But when I'm knitting for my brother, his are so much bigger that this tends to, you know, tilt a little bit. It's just a little harder, especially with the foot, because he's got an 11-inch ball of foot, which means the sock is little, it's about 10 inches, maybe a little bit. I think that's about 10 inches in circumference. And so that's really big. And so me trying to get this into the heel and keeping it straight is tricky. And years ago, I made myself a cardboard one of these for him, and I don't know what happened to it. I don't know how it could have gotten thrown out. Why wouldn't I have known what it was? So last night I got a cardboard box out, and this is a little wider. I ended up kind of cutting it funny here. I wanted it longer and I wanted it wider so that it would just fit better inside of his sock. And so I made this, and it works just as well as this. Hopefully I won't throw it out again, but and I just have it marked from 7 inches up to 10. I'm not going to need to mark anything more than that. when you get up into these areas. You can use it in the leg of a sock. Like if you are knitting the leg and you wanted to, see how long it was so far, you could use it for that. I'm usually fine with just a regular ruler or measuring tape for that. It's the foot where you've got this rounded toe or this rounded heel and you're trying to get that measurement that I find this kind of thing really useful. So that was the first thing I DIY'd. The second thing was a tool. I made it when I was spinning this because it was right at the beginning of Tour de Fleece. I had gone to an event with my friend Elizabeth and I had spun up this ounce while we were there, and I was thinking when we were on our way home that I had this full ounce and it was all on one bobbin and I wanted to make a 2-ply. And normally if I just have one bobbin and a small amount, like if I'm doing a sample or something like some of those smaller ones that I did of the Tunis, for example, I would use what's called a plying bracelet. Some people call it an Andean plying bracelet. The idea is like if you are plying with, you have 2 bobbins full of singles and you're plying them together, one of them is going to run out before the other one. And so what you can do is at the end of that little bobbin that's just got a little bit left, you can wind it onto your hand in a very specific way, doing this plying bracelet. So I just tuck one tail into my watch. But what you do, you come across your palm and you come around your middle finger and then you wrap around the back side. You go to the far side of your middle finger and wrap it around that way. Again, you go back around, far side of your thumb or your middle finger and around, and you just keep doing that. You'll never have anything going across your palm. It's always on the back. You can see how they're crisscrossing on the back. Okay, so you get to the end. And again, this is for small amounts. That's the whole point, it's for small amounts. But I had done like this whole ounce of this caracal. And I knew from past experience that when I have a full ounce, by the time I'm getting to the end of the ounce, this finger is like that, and it's just putting a lot of pressure on it. And it's just so much that couldn't hold it all. Here's the beauty of this plying bracelet thing. Once you're done winding everything around, you take it off of your middle finger. And so you can have this around your wrist. It is not going around your wrist. Remember, we never went across the front of the palm. What it did was it went this way, and it came around, and it went that way, and it came around, and it went that way. And because of winding it this way, you can have this around your wrist, and you can have these 2 plies or 2 strands going into your spinning wheel, and it's twisting around, and it just comes off. They come off because they're both just going back and forth. It just comes off. It's really nice. So it's not like a center pull ball at all. A center pull ball, you can add or gain twist by doing this. You don't add or gain any twist from this. But again, there's limitations to this. Normally you'd have 2 full bobbins and you'd be spinning from both of them. So again, the idea is it's the end of that, or you're doing sampling or whatever. But again, I didn't, want to spin a half an ounce on 2 different bobbins or try to wind off some and measure and whatever, because it was still going to end up not even. I just wanted to use the plying bracelet, but I knew it was going to be too much. So I asked my friend Elizabeth, is there some kind of a tool that lets you do that, but lets you wind more on there? She said, yeah, it's called a Handy Andy. So as an Andean plying bracelet. So I looked it up when I got home, and what it is, there's a few different ones out there. Some are plastic, some are 3D printed, some are wood. The wood ones, they look kind of like a mushroom. They have a stem like this, and then they come out like this, and it's like a semicircle. So that width is about as wide as your hand would be. And then there's a peg that goes in the top of the mushroom cap. And so instead of your middle finger. So you're winding it around that peg, and then you take the peg out, and it all falls down to the stem of the mushroom, and then you can just ply it off of that. And I thought, well, that's really cool. And I didn't like the plastic ones. I liked the wooden ones, but I needed something right away. So I found a really old blog post, like 15, 20 years old, of someone who had DIY'd one. She had taken 2 pieces of cardboard and then a knitting needle. And she said, I used a size 7, which is a 4.5 millimeter needle. It was probably too small. I'd use a bigger one next time, so I used a bigger one. And I didn't need 2 pieces of cardboard because I had a box where it was folded together. So the only reason you needed 2 pieces was to, something to sandwich around the knitting needle. And so then I did my plying. I went around this, and then when it was done, I pulled this out, and then I could put it on my wrist, and then I was able to ply it. So I thought, this is so cool. So my brother is a woodworker, and he's made me a few different tools over the years that aren't necessary, but are just nice. Like, yeah, I can use this cardboard thing, or I could even make a different cardboard thing, and it would work. But, I knit socks for my brother, and he enjoys doing little woodworking projects for me. So I sent him a picture of one with some dimensions, and he's going to make one for me. So that's really exciting. So that's why I started knitting him a pair of socks in anticipation of getting a new tool. But this worked really well. Worked really well for winding a larger quantity than I could manage on my hand. So that's a cool tip if you are somebody who likes to use the plying bracelet technique and you have a sample that's a little bit larger than what will fit comfortably around your hand. Well, that's it for this week's Casual Friday. If you have any comments or questions about today's video or suggestions for videos you'd like to see in the future, you can leave those down in the comments below. Or join the discussion in my Ravelry group, Rocks. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.